So, hello and welcome to another presentation session in Virtual Professional Learning Network project. My name is Öztürk, and on behalf of VIP Learning Network team, I would like to welcome you all to our second webinar session. So following the tradition in our first webinar, you will be very happy to see what city or country our participants are from tonight. Maybe in the chat box, you can just type your cities. And meanwhile, I would like to hand over to Roger Cohen, the Regional English Language Office, the Director of Regional English Language Office at the State Department of the United States in Ankara. So Roger, maybe you can have your opening remarks and then we will go on with Osman.
We can't hear you, right?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. It's very nice to see you all this evening. Welcome to our second webinar in our webinar series. I am the Regional English Language Officer at the Regional English Language Office at the U.S. Embassy in Ankara. And we are delighted to be supporting this project and working with Osman Hocam and his team. For the last almost 3 decades, the Regional English Language Office in Ankara has been working with teachers all over Turkey on various projects, and we've been working on courses for learners. And this is one of the most exciting projects we've done, I think, in the last few years. So besides this project, our goal is to work with as many of you as possible. We would love it if you participated in our other programs throughout Turkey. We do teacher trainings, we do online courses, we do various webinar series, all kinds of projects to promote English language learning and teaching all throughout the country. So after this webinar, our office will be sending you a newsletter of all of the programs that we'll be doing in November. So we would love it if you participated. And if you wrote us, you can see our email at the bottom of the screen, reloturkey@state.gov. That's reloturkey@state.gov. If you would like more information about the Regional English Language Office and more about what we do, you can go to the link also at the bottom of the screen. And I have been in Turkey for just about a year, and I will quickly say some of the most requested trainings and speaker requests that we get are for gaming, gamification, and how to use various web applications. So serendipitously, they have all come together this evening with our 2 very fine speakers. So I hope you enjoy the program this evening. Thank you very much, and I will give it back to Osman Hocam. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much, Roger, for being with us tonight. And it's our pleasure to have you and have your support with us as well. And now I would like to hand over to Osman Solmaz, who is the project director of the VIP Learning Network project.
Thank you, Özge Hocam, for the introduction. And thank you, Roger, for your introduction of the RELO program. We are very happy to be sponsored by the RELO at US Embassy Ankara. And we are excited to meet you all for the second virtual event of our project. In the first one, if you have participated, you will remember that we talked about how to use and bring Harry Potter universe into the classroom. So for those who missed it out, you can visit our website to watch that webinar as well. And you will see that my colleagues will be sharing the link of our project website. And you can follow the future events through our Instagram page and also our web page, which will be also shared on the chat box. So we are happy to see you joining us today, over 200 people live right now. And I am looking forward to hearing Dr. Reinhardt and Dr. Polat's talk. And I'm hoping that you are all excited as we are. Özge Hocam.
So thank you very much, for your words. And now, before we start, I would like to just introduce our program today. We will have 2 talks, and probably each of them will last for 30 minutes, and then we will have Q&A session for another half an hour. So before we start, I just also want to let you know about our website. If you want to know more about our project, we will have following webinar series. So please feel free to follow our website and our social media accounts. So our first speaker is Dr. Reinhardt today, and I would like to introduce him to you before we start. So it's a great pleasure today for me to introduce Dr. Reinhardt, and he teaches courses for English undergraduate, MA TESOL graduate, and SLAT PhD graduate students, primarily focused on teaching languages with technology, sociolinguistics, and teaching English as a foreign language. His research interests lie in the relationship between technological change and the theory and practice of technology-enhanced second and foreign language pedagogy, especially with emerging technologies like social media and digital gaming. He sits on the editorial boards of Calico Journal and Language Learning and Technology, for which he serves also as book review editor. He was serving as president of the Computer Assisted Language Instructions Consortium, Calico, for the years 2019 and 2020. So it is our great pleasure to have you, Dr. Reinhardt. The stage is yours.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It's quite an honor to be here. I'm very excited to share my talk with you today. First of all, let me explain that this is based on a short paper that I wrote with a graduate student, and it's available online for you to download. I'm going to put that in the chat at the end of the talk, but it will also be available on the VIP Learning website along with this talk for you. So I'm going to talk about using games, particularly digital games or video games in English language teaching and learning. And what are some key points, some things that based on research and practice that we can advise that people do, or if they want to get started, and things to pay attention to when they engage in this practice as part of their teaching. So I imagine many of you have some experience playing digital games. I also hope that some of you have implemented digital games or tried to use digital games in your classroom. And so a lot of what I say to you may be familiar, maybe you've come across it or you've realized it based on your experiences. So let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, when you're talking about video games, it's good to think about what exactly is a game and how do we define it. Not everything that people call games really, I think, should be considered games. And it's something to think about when you're implementing it or you're thinking about using it in the classroom. So generally, we can define a game as an activity that has rules, goals, and outcomes, and is usually voluntary, engaging, and entertaining. So a game has rules, it has goals, there's an object of the game, what you're supposed to do, and it has outcomes, usually meaning you win or you lose, right? Usually it's voluntary, meaning that you choose to play it, and if you haven't chosen to play it, there's a question on whether or not you consider it a game. And there's interesting fiction out there like The Hunger Games, you might be familiar with, or Battle Royale, that sort of idea where people are playing games or they're being told they're playing games, but in their minds, they're not playing it. And then there's also the idea that, well, a game should be engaging, meaning it should be fun, it should involve you, but it isn't necessarily fun in the sense of joy or happiness, not necessarily. It can be engaging, meaning it involves you, and you maybe you're scared in the game, maybe you're somehow emotionally involved. So that idea of engagement is important. And then the idea of entertaining, and this is also important to think about, because when we think about teaching and we think about education, sometimes we oppose that to the idea of entertainment, and people will say, well, education shouldn't be entertaining, it should be serious. But if we're going to call it a game, really it should have an entertaining element to it. So all this goes to say is that we might want to think about a game as something that's a mindset, or something that is a disposition or a feeling, something that's subjective in the mind of the player. So this question, if a language learning game is not entertaining nor voluntary, can we still call it a game? And that's sort of at the heart of some of the debates in the field of game-based learning. Now, in this talk, I do mean video game or digital game, but some of these insights and ideas also apply to other kinds of games. So when we think about what are some examples of games, can you call these games? Poker is a card game played in the United States, maybe in other places around the world. So cards, would you consider cards games? What makes them a game specifically? I learned about this game called Mangala, which apparently is a kid's game. Maybe adults play it too, kind of like checkers. Quizlet, I don't know if you've used Quizlet. This is online. It's sort of is like flashcards that give you points for getting things right. Would you consider that a game? Does it fit these requirements? Oh, poker again. Whoops, sorry, I did that twice. Duolingo, maybe you've tried Duolingo, the app or the learning website. And Duolingo, what about it is game-like? Do you have rules, goals, outcomes? Yes, yes, voluntary. Is it entertaining? Yes. Is it engaging? So you could perhaps call it a game. But some people will say, well, this is actually just gamified learning. It's just more like a learning activity. It's not really a game because it has more of a serious outcome. Call of Duty is a very popular video game. Maybe you're familiar with it. I think that would fit with this definition. And I learned about some other games. There was one of the earliest video games designed there in Turkey, Keloğlan, which was sort of like it was a text-based game where you went through different rooms and you had different experiences. And I thought, wow, that looks like quite an interesting game. I'd love to see if anybody's used it to learn Turkish, maybe. Another one, Komşu Çiftlik, which is apparently like a Turkish Farmville, where you have a farm and you have to collect different kinds of things. And the question is, well, is there an end state to that game? Do you actually have some sort of an outcome, or you just sort of keep going? And some people say, well, actually simulations aren't necessarily games. So anyway, I wanted to start off with this because thinking about what a game is important when you start to teach with them. So the first idea here, not all games have language learning potential. There are both vernacular and commercial and educational games that can be used for English language learning. So what is a vernacular game? This means a commercial game, an entertainment game, a game that's off the shelf that hasn't been designed specifically for language learning. And then of course, educational games, you can imagine. So these vernacular games are designed for learning in order to play. That means that the people who designed them think that play is the end goal, and that whatever you have to learn, you're doing it so that you can play the game. And that's very powerful because when we play games, whatever we have to do in order to play, in order to accomplish that goal, is what we do. And if that involves learning language or using language, then we'll probably do that because we want to play, right? So these games are authentic, which is great, but they might require pedagogical mediation. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, about what you can do to actually adapt a game, a commercial game for learning in a formal way, say for your students. There are also educational games, of course, designed for playing in order to learn. So the people who design these games think that learning is the end goal, and they want the students to play them with the end goal of learning. And one of the problems with this, I think, is, well, some students, if they don't think, well, they're just playing, they may, oh, they're thinking, oh, this is a trick. I'm being tricked into playing, but the actual goal is to learn. It may result in an educational game that isn't necessarily as fun. So we have to understand a second language learning approach is built into these games, which is great for us as teachers, but whatever that approach is might not be aligned with us, and the game might not necessarily be effective as a learning tool. So it sort of is you're dependent on whatever pedagogy is built in. So here are some examples of vernacular and educational games. Whoops. And so the citations underneath it are studies that have researched language learning in these particular games. So the vernacular games at the top left, for example, The Sims, you may be familiar with. It's sort of like a digital dollhouse where you create characters and then you build their houses and you have them interact with each other. And a lot of people have noted that, well, this is great language learning potential because all of the vocabulary for basic everyday activities and things are built into the game and you have to engage with them. World of Warcraft, you might be familiar with, and a lot of research has gone into this game because it's a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, or a MORPG. And what it does is that it's a social game, and it has people in different places playing together and accomplishing tasks together. And we know at the heart of learning language is social interaction and collaborating in order to achieve some sort of a goal. And that is sort of the perfect setup for learning language. Other games, adventure games. This one is on the upper right, is called My Summer Vacation. It was a Japanese game, and this person, Kaio Shintaku, she looked at how students learning Japanese could use this game and what it was about the game design that helped them. One of the things was that it had subtitles, you could pause it, it had engaging little games to play, it had stories with which you could identify. Some of the things that we know are also related to language learning. Now on the lower left, educational games, the first one is called Practice Spanish, Study Abroad. This was designed by a educational publisher to teach Spanish. And in this game, you basically go to a village in Latin America and you interact with people, and you have money and health, and you have to accomplish different tasks. And it's basically like going on study abroad, but in this game world. And this is very educational. There are specific educational goals. Another one is a mobile game. So there are lots of potential for taking your game with you outside into different places and exploring and learning things in the real world environment. This one was designed in Albuquerque, New Mexico, an American state, where learners of Spanish went out into the neighborhood and interacted with an imaginary storyline. Space Team ESL is a fun game that you play on your cell phone, or students play on their cell phone. So everybody's on a local network, and they have to communicate with each other to tell each other what to do to stop their spaceship from exploding. So they have to say, click on the red button 3 times, turn the knob to the right, do this and do that. And if you don't get it right, then your spaceship crashes. And then another one on the right, this was a simulation game. It's designed for street children in Egypt to develop a booth, like a little stall where they can sell goods and things. And so in this game, you had to manage your booth and get goods and sell them. And this person, Karim Ibrahim, he did a study of Arabic learners learning Arabic by playing this game individually. So there are lots of varieties, different types of games, different vernacular games, educational games that can be used. So this is sort of the research slide here that mentions a lot of the studies that have looked at how games are used. If you're interested in these, I will have a bibliography available as well. But what research has shown why games can be good. And it's not necessarily all games, of course, right? A game where you're just shooting things and not using language maybe isn't necessarily good for language learning. So good games are good because they teach learners, or they allow learners to associate form, meaning, function relationships. So you have a thing, you're told what it is, and you have to manipulate it in the game and use it for a purpose. And this is great. This is a great way to learn language. Games allow learners to manipulate time for clarification and repetition of input and output. So you can repeat an activity in the game over and over, and the computers make great teachers in the sense that they don't get bored out of just like telling you the same thing over and over again, as long as you need to do it. But it can also pressure you with time to do things within a certain amount of time, or give you enough time you need. Games can allow you to practice to mastery in sheltered spaces, meaning you get to practice, and if you mess up, that's okay, you get to try again. You're sheltered, the consequences aren't as dire or as high stakes as they might be in the real world. They allow you to set and achieve goals and earn rewards with targeted feedback. So this idea of goal focused learning is really at the heart of task-based learning and teaching. And games mimic this, and games are also really good at giving you feedback on what you get right, what you get wrong, and whether or not you've really understood something correctly. They allow you to work with others and use language in a meaningful way to accomplish shared goals, and this is called languaging. They allow you to perform new identities, to perceive and take on new identities and try out what it would be like to be this kind of a person or that kind of a person. They allow you to play and learn anytime, anywhere, especially mobile games. And then they help develop learner autonomy. So they teach you how to take charge of your own learning. A lot of this is in a book I've written, 2019, and some articles. And again, I'll offer all of these at the end. So promising game genres. What types of games are useful? Action adventure games, multiplayer cooperative games, strategy simulation games, open world games. So what is it about these kinds of games that promote language learning or allow it or afford it? Well, the one on the lower left here at the top is called Assassin's Creed. Maybe you're familiar with this. This game, you play an assassin, and you're in some point in history in the past at some place in the world, and they have these set all over the world. And you have to basically accomplish tasks, and you actually learn about history as you're going along. And there's narratives that you engage with, and you have to basically accomplish different things. And so that idea can promote, by having to do that, it can promote learning. Among Us, maybe you're familiar with this. This is a very popular game. This was a huge, huge game a year ago in the United States because it was easy to play online with your friends. So everybody was stuck at home. And so they played this game Among Us. And in this game, you have to cooperate with everybody else in order to figure out who among you, which one of the players has been told that they are actually the enemy. They go around and they try to murder everybody on a spaceship, and everybody else tries to accomplish a bunch of tasks while they try to figure out who that is. So they're cooperative, and you're taking on a role, but because they're cooperative, you basically are encouraged to communicate with other people and try to talk about what you think is happening or who you think is the murderer among you. Don't Starve Together is the same sort of game where you are dropped on an alien planet and you have to work with other people who have different abilities and skills in order to survive the fact that you may have no food. There are monsters at night who come to kill you. So, but if you die, you get to try again. So this game, Don't Starve Together, is a multiplayer cooperative game. Strategy and simulation games, I mentioned The Sims before, but these promote planning, problem solving, systems thinking. Life Quest is another one where you have to take on a character and lead them through their life, choose a job, create a house, do these that sort of combines also some adventure mechanics. Minecraft, you might be familiar with, as an open world game where you get to just create anything you want to. And in that game, you basically can make up your own stories. It can unlock creativity, imagination. So there's lots of promise in these different genres. So good games promote interaction, and they promote different kinds of interaction. They promote interaction well with the content in the game that's built into the game, put there by the designers. So to understand what this is, you have to think, as the teacher looking at this game, you have to think, well, what is the game about? What language must be known in order to play the game by themselves? Like if you're just playing the game on your own, what language do you have to know in order to get through the game, to learn the rules, and then to engage in the narratives? So that sort of interaction is promoted by good game design. Good game design promotes interaction through or around the game with other players, especially if it's a multiplayer game. So the language that you use to talk to other people when you're playing the game about the game is also a real source of opportunities for language learning. So if you are thinking about a game, think about, when playing with others, what language must players know to interact and play the game together in order to finish this game. So even games that are board games, card games, analog games that are not digital, they offer a lot of this kind of interaction and this type of language that can lead to learning. Interactions about the game at the textual or the discourse level. So what language do you need if you're communicating about the game, often online in game forums, videos, live streams? So there's a lot of language used about games that are not necessarily in the game or even around the game, but that are online, maybe forums where people talk about the rules, maybe fan fiction where people talk about stories based on the characters. So all of this is why games, these types of language these types of interaction that games promote can support language learning. However, and this is a really important point to think about, playing a game in another language is hard if you don't know the rules of the game. And this can make learning a language through game challenging if you don't know the kind of game that you're being asked to play. If that happens, you may reach cognitive overload because your brain is trying to learn the rules of the game at the same time it's trying to learn the language to play the game or to learn those rules. And so basically the idea is that, especially if your students aren't game players, if they don't know the kind of game that you're going to play with them together, you've got to give them enough time. You've got to let them maybe focus on one thing or the other separately. So this means that you need to know what they know about games. What games do they like to play? What are they good at? How do they understand games? It might be a good thing to start with a game that is easy to learn, that is familiar to your students, maybe something that has basic or repeatable core mechanics. So casual games, for example, are really good for this. And then avoid games that are basically all action or that cannot be paused, that actually force you to do something very quickly, like respond to some sort of dialogue, respond to something very fast. Because those games, unless you really know how to play them, we're going to just stress you out because you don't know what was said to you or what the language was. So thinking about this idea of cognitive overload when you're thinking about teaching with games is important. So another point, learner players, and this is a way to think about using this term instead of just a student or a learner, thinking about them as learners and players at the same time. They need help focusing on the language. So what you have to do as a teacher is to focus their attention to the language that's in, around, and about the game, all these interactions. So how do you do this? Well, there are a few different ways, but one thing you can do is that before the learner players play the game, you need to awaken their schema, get them thinking about games, get them thinking about the content, that what is the game about, thinking about their attitudes towards learning with games, situate the content in their experience. How can they relate to it before they even start? And then, because you have played the game before and you have noted the vocabulary that's in the game and the structures and some of the other elements, maybe some cultural elements, you will want to perhaps preview the vocabulary with them, maybe give them some activity, asking them to think about or use this vocabulary that they are going to encounter in the game. Now, during the gameplay, when they're playing, you don't want to challenge them too much. Maybe they have a few little tasks to do that they can do without necessarily interrupting the game too much. But if you're going to have them do some big task, you want to make sure they can pause it. And you don't want to disrupt the game flow too much, because if you do, then you make the game less fun, less engaging. Now, after the game is when you can really focus on getting the students to think about what happened in the game, what vocabulary did they encounter, and get them talking about the game. And this is another opportunity to use language about the game, around the game, and those interactions that are authentic, because players want to share what they did with each other in the game with other people. And that can be sort of a natural opportunity for using more language authentically. So some sample game tasks. I often get asked this, well, what exactly can I do? Well, one thing you can do is just play one game, projecting it on the screen in the front of the room. Maybe you have one student designated as the driver or the controller, and maybe that person can rotate through students. So what you do maybe for just 10 minutes in one class period is you have one student playing the game, and you as a whole class talk about what is the player doing, what is going on, point out the different language elements that you need to. So you do it as one class altogether. Another way to approach it is to play the game in pairs, 2 students or teams, 3 or 4. And then each of the people in that group then has different roles. So one person is the driver, but another person might be the navigator or the taskmaster. Another person might be the note taker or the observer. Another person might be the librarian or the translator. So you can think about the different sorts of things that people would do in a task if they're exploring a world that has, different tasks, different language, different things that they have to pay attention to. And then by distributing those tasks and giving them roles, then they can sort of focus on what they need to do individually and not the whole thing. So that can lower the cognitive overload for some of them. Another thing you can have students do is to play a game at home, maybe a game that they have chosen that they want to play. And really, honestly, any of these games you have students play, they should have some input, and maybe you pre-select some games and then have them decide which one they're going to do. But if they're playing it at home, they can choose the game, what they can do, or they can play the game on their own. They can keep a gameplay diary. For example, maybe play for 2 hours a week, and in the diary they write in English, what did they do in the game? What are some rules? What did they like about it? What did they not like about it? What are some of the stories? What did they think was funny, challenging, interesting, those sorts of experiences? Another kind of game task, depending on how involved your students are, they might create a guide to the game, a guide to using the game as a language learning tool, a glossary of some of the vocabulary or the grammar or pragmatic items in the game. They might write a critical review of the game, or they might write some fan fiction thinking about, well, what would happen if these characters in the game had another experience? What happened to them on the side? And I understand you did talked about Harry Potter in the classroom. Maybe that was one of the tasks that I know people do with fan fiction. Okay, number 6. This is important to remember, that player buy-in is key to success. So, as I said, giving your students the choice of what game to play, whether or not they want to play the game. So think carefully if you're going to make it a core activity for the class, and make sure everybody's on board, because as I said in the beginning about what is a game and how do we define a game, if you force someone to play a game against their will, it doesn't really count as a game, and in fact, it can be detrimental. It can be very unpleasant. So, survey them. What games do they like to play? What don't they like to play? Why do they like to play them? How do they feel about learning through games? Do they think it can work? So getting students involved in developing their meta-awareness of why are they doing an activity for learning a language, and is learning with games something that they think they could do. Some students, even if they play games at home and they love to play games, they may say, no, when I'm learning language, I need to write papers and use dictionaries and do very serious activities, not games. Other students might say, well, that would be fun. I love to play games. And if I could play a game in English and learn English, that would be great. Others might say, I've never played a game before. I don't know. So surveying them and figuring out what exactly they would get out of it is important for raising their awareness or their consciousness of how this could be used. And then demonstrating to them how to play a game as a language learning tool can be helpful yourself as a teacher to go through, show them, well, what does it mean to play a game and pay attention to the language and notice and try to figure out what things mean. So modeling or demonstrating can be important. And as I said, you've got to be careful of the difficulty of the task you ask them to do, especially if you are asking them to do it during the game. Some students, if you ask them to do a task around the game, they might be like, wow, this is much more fun than I thought it would be. But others might say, whoa, this is ruining the whole game experience for me. I love playing games, but that's all for escape and entertainment. I hate using it for formal learning purposes. So this leads to this, and I know you hate to hear this, but I'm going to tell you it right now. You must play games. Teachers have to play the game too. So you wouldn't have your students read a book or watch a movie that you haven't read or watched, would you? Right? This is something I ask people because some of the people who know their students want to play games, they're like, I don't really like to play games. Well, this is something you're going to have to figure out because you want to engage in the experience with your students as they do it, and your enthusiasm and your engagement with it will demonstrate to them why it's a worthwhile experience. So how do you do this? Well, first, you have to play the game that you think might be a good one to play with your students as a gamer, to learn the rules yourself. Maybe it's a game, hopefully, that's not too hard to learn. The really big, complex games that are expensive anyway are going to be maybe not great candidates for class activities. Then you want to play it again, and you want to play it as a language learning, and think of yourself as not knowing the language, knowing what level your students are at, and figuring out what language you're using as you need to play it, what language you're using as you play it, and what you need to know as you play it. And then play as a teacher. Think about what kinds of tasks could you have students do. Maybe note some vocabulary. Maybe pay attention to the kinds of quests or activities that they're doing, asking them to recount what they did when there's an opportunity to pause or after the game or something. And then that's after that, then you would have students play the game. So don't just say, pick a game. Okay, that's the game you want to play, then go ahead and play it. You wouldn't do that with a book or a film or any other sort of resource. You'd want to make sure you vetted it first, and also make sure that it's appropriate, right? Especially if you have kids, there may be some game content that is not appropriate for your students. And then this point, don't take the fun out of it. So a gamified lesson is still a lesson, and a learnified game can still be a game, but a lessonified game is no fun. So what do I mean by that? Well, to gamify something means to take something that is not normally a game and try to add features or elements or mechanics of a game on top of it to make it into a game. But at its heart, underneath that, it still is what it is. So like a lesson, we can say, I'm going to add rewards to my lesson. I'm going to add a point system to my lesson. I'm going to add a leaderboard where students can see each other and compete with each other, like on their scores, right? I can add that and gamify my lesson. But underneath it, it's still a lesson. Same thing with a game. A game, if you learnify it, meaning you try to find elements in it, and these are my words, by the way. Gamified is a word, but learnify is my word. Lessonify is my word. Don't look them up because you won't find them in the dictionary. But learnify, if you learnify a game, meaning you try to make it an activity with which you can learn something with it. If you don't go too far and ruin it, it can still be a game and they can still learn in order to play. But if you go too far and you really try to push it and make it a lesson and you break it down, then it's really no fun. So don't take the fun out of it. Think about, again, that idea of learners and players, allowing students to go back and forth between being learners and players. Allow for and reward different play styles. And this is a whole nother topic. But when people play games, they play for different reasons. And they have different strategies and styles. Some of them want to achieve things. Some of them want to explore and just discover new things. Some of them want to play with other people and socialize and have fun with their friends. And others just want to just have a good time and get the thrill of playing, joyriders. So when you have these tasks for learning, try to frame and not interrupt the gameplay with the task. So those are the main ideas I wanted to go through here. Here's the summary. Not all games have language learning potential. Consider both educational and vernacular games. Good game designs afford or allow language learning for a variety of reasons, and no games are equally useful. So this idea that not all games are equally useful. Some games are better than others as language learning resources. The ones that embed language and require language use and that they allow students to maybe use different resources, pause the game, turn the game, turn subtitles off and on, those sorts of things, as opposed to games where you just have to shoot things and pick up a gun and then shoot another thing and pick up another gun and shoot another thing. I don't know that those have much use for learning language. Good game designs promote interactions in, through, around, and about the game. So these interactions are where language is used. And using language is how we learn it. Learning to play a game and learning a language at the same time is challenging. So think about that when you design your tasks or the kind of game that you have your students play. Teachers need to help learner players focus on the language and provide game tasks to be done before and after game play, and maybe during, depending on the kind of task. Player buy-in is very key to success. Make sure your students want to, that they are engaged, that they have options, that they feel they have some agency when they're playing. Teachers should play a game before teaching with it. It's class preparation, right? I'm telling you, you need to do it. Don't take the fun out of game by making it a learning chore, and that's key. All right. Well, this is all I have. Oops. Thank you. Teşekkür ederim. This talk is based on 8 things to know about teaching language video games. Here is the URL. I will post this in the chat as well. And if you're interested in some of my papers, some of my work, you can go to my academia.edu page. And here's my email. Feel free to send me any message about any of your questions or thoughts.
Well, thank you, Dr. Reinhardt, for your interesting presentation. And there are lots of comments going on in the chat box. Yeah. And personally, you gave me inspiration for the Spanish learning. I will discover more about study abroad, I guess, after today's webinar. So thank you very much. And now I would like to move on with our second speaker tonight. And Dr. Polat is with us, and it's a great pleasure to have him tonight with us. And currently working as a full-time assistant professor at Bahçeşehir University Faculty of Educational Sciences, a part-time teacher trainer at National Geography Learning, and a visiting instructor at Boğaziçi University, he graduated from Middle East Technical University at the Department of Foreign Language Education. He completed his MA degree at METU, specializing in the integration of conflict management and effective communication skills into intensive language programs. Having taught English at various foundation universities in Turkey for several years, he started a PhD program as a Fulbright scholar in second language acquisition and teaching at the University of Arizona. He has expertise in language pedagogy and educational technology. During his job as a project coordinator at Bahçeşehir University School of Foreign Languages, he was involved in various projects to integrate both synchronized and asynchronized use of technology into classroom practices. So it is so nice to have you, Dr. Polat, with us tonight. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Özge Hocam, for this kind introduction. And here is player 2. So I feel privileged to be part of this event. And I also, excited about being a second player in this, game after Dr. Reinhardt, from whom I have been lucky actually to have a course with when I was at the University of Arizona. So yeah, I am really excited actually about this event. So let me share my screen with you right now. Okay, yeah. And I will also follow the chat as I am talking about my topic. Just a minute. Yes, okay, ready to go. After Dr. Reinhardt, I'll be talking about multimedia and some web applications. And as part of this, if I need to give you a kind of rough outline, first I'll talk about multimedia learning, and I'll be also referring to specific interesting studies actually, in which assumptions and facts or findings do not parallel each other. And then I'll be suggesting some, apps to this end, especially related to the use of video or multimedia, and also another multimedia form, annotations or classes. Okay, and as I have also mentioned, and I would like to say hello to everyone. There's great audience there. I can certainly see that. I have been able to follow the chat, and I have read so many suggestions actually there. So yeah, there's really great audience actually, as far as I see. Okay, I would like to start with a quote. So tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. So in my presentation, as much as possible, I also would like to involve you by receiving your answers, ideas, assumptions, beliefs, etc. Okay, so let me start. So first of all, as I said, I'll be talking about multimedia learning. And while we're talking about it, actually, I would like to, explain why this is important actually for us. So you have prepared so many PowerPoint presentations. You are also preparing them. You have seen so many PowerPoint presentations so far. In addition to these, you have also prepared class materials. You are preparing them as well. So when it comes to training videos, e-learning materials, and worksheets, multimedia learning becomes really important. And of course, based on research, there are also some principles actually that might be also helpful for us as well. So that's why actually I will be talking about this topic. So, okay, I think you're not listening to me right now, most probably. What really attract your attention right now on this slide most probably is not me, but this, slow, lazy animal sloth. I think you're able to see it, right? Okay, that's what I mean by or with multimedia learning principles, actually. Sometimes for the fun or for engagement purposes, we use this kind of like funny stuff on our slides. But when you do have such things, actually, you could be sure that nobody is listening to you, but they're just trying to understand actually what is there, and they're just most probably interested in that. So that would be the idea. That's why actually I can lose it. And instead, so while I'm talking about these multimedia learning principles, I would like to refer you to some, theories actually. One of them is dual coding theory, which is about our, brain processes actually. So we process both, audio, words, and at the same time, video, visuals. And Dr. Reinhardt also mentioned cognitive overload, actually, which is really critical because that takes us to the second theory, which is about our working brain's actually limited capacity. And finally, our brain processes actually things, in an active learning way, which means if something is relevant to you or if something is meaningful for you, that means your brain is going to process it actually it faster, better, so that you can remember it in the long run. So back to the list of materials actually that we have there. When we are, preparing all these materials, we need to consider some multimedia principles. And I'm just going to share some of them as listed by Meyer in his book published in 2005. And I'm just going to refer to some of them just to give you an idea actually. So yeah, let's start with one of them. So the first principle I would like to share with you is Coherence Principle. And according to this principle, we need to cut out the extras. So that slot actually that you have seen, I mean the lazy or slow animal, that was an extra actually, that was not directly related to, to my topic. So cut out the extras, remove all the fluff, use only the information that the learner needs. That means simple text and simple visuals that relate directly to the learning topic. Let me give you 2 slides at this point. This is one, and this is the other one. So based on this principle, which one do you think fits into the principle? The one on the left or the one on the right? You can write in the chat box, left or right. Okay, so yeah, for the interest of time, I'll move to the answer. The one on the left, of course. And yes, I mean, if something is not directly related to, what you're talking about or the topic, even if they are somehow related to, if you really don't need them, if they're just extras, just cut out them as much as possible. And that's Coherence Principle. And by the way, for these images, actually, I would like to thank to, Waterbear Learning website, which is also going to be provided among my links as part of my presentation. And for the ones who are curious about, I'll be happy to share my presentation as well. That will be available on the website. Okay, next principle is signaling principle. And according to this principle, we need to show the learner exactly what to pay attention to on the screen. For this reason, we can highlight important words and use arrows, for example, to point out significant information. So again, let me share 2 slides with you or 2 pieces of material with you. And which one do you think is fitting into this principle? Yeah. Okay, you're all right. Yeah, the right one. So yes, that's true. I mean, while we're talking about all these principles, maybe you could be familiar with them already, but I want you to review and think about all the materials, all the presentations you have prepared, and you'll be also preparing as well. So let's skip to the next principle, Personalization Principle, which tells us that we need to keep our message simple and casual. And this allows learners feel more comfortable, and we need to avoid using overly professional sounding text or long, complex words. And let's see the slides again. So which one do you think achieves this purpose or this principle? The one on the left or the one on the right? Okay, oh. Great, thank you for all of your answers. Actually, yeah, the left one, actually, the one on the left. So let's talk about another principle, which is the Modality Principle. And according to this principle, we talked about different channels. So it's not just visuals, it's not just words, but we can have both of them at the same time. That's what we mean by multimedia. So when we have voiceover in the material, actually, we prepare in voiceover supported learning, we need to try to limit the amount of text used, and we need to rely on visual instead, if possible. Text should be used for only key definitions, lists, and directions. So some practical tips actually for you. And here is one and the other one. So which one? One on the left or the one on the right? Okay, wow. We have, as I said, yeah, we have a great audience here. Actually, yeah, that's right. The one on the left, actually, as you can see, I mean, we have already a nice visual there. And we also have a text actually on the right one, but it's a little bit quite detailed actually. So again, so that brings us to our next principle, spatial contiguity principle, which tells us that we need to keep all related text and graphics physically close together. Okay, so they shouldn't be like, you know, dispersed all around the slide or materials. And here are our slides. So which one do you think fits into this principle? Okay, yes, that's very correct. The one on the right. And yeah, 2 more to go. I have only included like 7 of them for the interest of time, as I said. So the next one we have is segmenting principle. And based on this principle, we need to provide learners with control over their learning by including, for example, next buttons, if you're talking about a video here, and customizable video settings. Also make sure learning is segmented into small chunks. And here we have one and the other one. So which one do you think fits into the principle? The one on the right or the one on the left? So why left, by the way? I mean, they're almost very like identical actually, but the difference on the left one is that there is controls actually, right? Provided to the learner actually. So yeah, they can control their own learning processes. So yeah, that's why the one on the left. And that brings us to the final principle that I'm going to share with you, which is the redundancy principle. And this is also an important one, I think. This is something we need to really take into consideration. When, again, there is an audio narration, voiceover, we should use only graphics on screen, and we shouldn't use graphics and text at the same time when there's voiceover. Why again? So we have, when we consider our working memory, actually, that has a limited capacity. And when we add another channel, that creates an overload actually for our brain to process information. Again, let me show you the slides. So imagine that there's also a voiceover. When there's a voiceover, the one on the left or on the right is fitting into this principle. Yeah. Certainly the one on the right. Thank you all for your answers actually so far. So you have done a great job indeed. And yes, that brings us to all of the principles at the same time. As I said, I'll be already sharing the links, and this is something you can also easily find. And this is, I mean, like extensively researched, I can say, for the last, like 2 or even 3 decades, actually, these kind of, theories. But still, if you're interested in, you'll find it in my presentation as well. Right now, I'll just, go on with some specific studies which have some interesting findings actually for us. Before I mention those studies though, I'm just going to ask you about your assumption about a specific case. Okay, let me ask this question to you. So I want your honest answer. So if you had an important test on listening comprehension, just like TOEFL or some other, high stakes exams, assuming the test is appropriate in length, difficulty, and content for your level of proficiency, would you prefer, for the audio, for what you're gonna hear, would you prefer it to be only audio or maybe video? Audio and visual at the same time. You know what a video is. Or the third option, video with captions. Which one would you like? And this is, as I said, an important exam. And what you're gonna hear is certainly appropriate in terms of length, difficulty, and everything for your level. It's not beyond your level or below your level. Okay. So what I usually, 1 is rare. There are so many people actually saying it's 3, option 3, but there are also people actually saying like 2. What about your students? If you are actively teaching right now, let me ask you the question from a different perspective now. If your students had an important test on listening comprehension, just like you actually in this case, would they prefer, which one do you think they would prefer? Think about your learners. I think they would certainly go for, yeah. Because, I would also do the same thing, right? So that makes you confident, actually, that makes you comfortable. But, I mean, what does research tell us actually? So I'm just going to share one study by one of my former MA students who worked on the impact of different media delivery modes, like, audio only or video with captions, on EFL learners' listening comprehension. The study was completed in 2019, and these are the research questions for you to make sense of the idea or of the research. 2 different media delivery modes, we mentioned all 3 of them, and they're also shown on the right, differ in terms of their effect on EFL learners' listening comprehension. Does it make any difference when it comes to their listening comprehension? And number 2, since we believe that there is going to be some sort of difference between assumptions, what students want, and how they can do better, we also asked the second question: what are EFL learners' perceptions of different media delivery modes in terms of their listening comprehension? Any ideas? Which group actually did better? Is it the video with captions group? And by the way, the study was quite controlled. It wasn't done in a lab environment, but we made sure that all of the groups actually take the test, the same test. However, we had 3 different tests, so we rotated actually the test for the participants. So which one do you think? We also talked about some principles, if you remember. We also talked about some theories at the beginning, like dual coding or cognitive overload. We talked about them. So let me share the results with you. Okay, here are the results. And I also considered the signaling principle actually when I was preparing this slide. So you can see the important parts actually in bold. The findings of the study revealed that the scores obtained in AV mode, okay, so audio and video, video, were significantly higher than that of A and AVC mode. And the lowest scores belong to A, which is just one mode. And the analysis of the qualitative data, I think this part is quite interesting, also revealed that students had a negative attitude towards audio-only mode, finding it relatively more challenging. And they had a very positive attitude towards AV and AVC, with more students stating their positive opinions on the latter. As in our case actually today, if you're asked, you would certainly go for audio, video, and caption mode. However, as you can see here, the video group actually can do better. However, as I said again, this is just one study. There are lots of other studies, and I can't say the studies are quite conclusive because there are different results. But there's another interesting study I would like to share here. In this study, we treated all of our participants as equal or similar in terms of their learning styles, in terms of their attitudes, etc. There's another study here which also researched into the working memory capacity of the students and their preferred input processing modality. So in this study, students were also tested on their working memory capacity, plus they were also asked about what they would prefer. So this is quite interesting. Does working memory capacity modulate, so makes some sort of difference in terms of the effect of full captions on listening comprehension or outcomes? Does preferred input processing modality modulate the effect of full captions on L2 listening outcomes? So these are the questions. Here, I think this is really critical because our working memory should also matter because some people have quite higher working memory capacity. So there were 60 participants in the study. And when we consider their results again, you can read that working memory capacity modulates the impact of L2 learners' preferred modality on their listening outcomes. So working memory capacity makes certainly a difference. However, here, when it comes to what they really prefer, there are some interesting findings. Modality preference didn't exert any significant impact for the lower working memory capacity. What does that mean? So if you have a lower working memory capacity, what you really prefer does not matter when it comes to different modes actually. However, for the higher working memory capacity participants, as you can also read in the final statement here, their modality preference played a pivotal role in modulating their listening outcome. In this case, auditory learners had the best listening performance within the video. So if they were auditory learners, they did a really good job when they were just viewing the video without captions. whereas visual learners did best when watching the captioned video. So, I mean, in the study we did with my MA student, it really mattered whether the mode is AVC or AV or just A. However, if your participants actually working memory capacity is quite high, as you can see, they can also do a very good job. So as you can see. Okay, this is just one thing I would like to share because we use video a lot in our classes and our students sometimes also prefer captions actually. So this also tells us something about what or how we can present or prepare our materials. Now, I'm just going to focus on another topic this time. I'm just going to focus on glosses or annotations. So again, another task for you. If you had an important test this time on reading comprehension, assuming the test is appropriate in length, difficulty, and content for your level of proficiency, would you prefer just the text, okay, just the reading passage, or text with one type of glosses, or text with more than one type of glosses? So if you ask what a gloss is, let me explain what it is. So this is an example for a gloss. If you are not sure about a word, you just click on it, you see some images about it, you see some audio about it, and you can just read some background knowledge on it. So that means if you have an exam, you're just given anything that might be like important maybe for you if you are in the third group or the second group. In the second group, there's one gloss given, maybe just the text. In the third group, there are more than. So which one would you prefer? The more the better, I think, right? I'd go for the third option. Okay, how about your students? Just, I mean, you're telling them they have an exam tomorrow, and if they like, you would also provide all the, glosses, I mean, word definitions and everything. So whenever they need it, they can click on it and they can read it. What do you think they would prefer? Again, yeah, most probably they would go for number 3, right? Option 3. Okay, what do you think research tells us about this? So yeah, let me go on. Here, I would like to refer to a study by Dr. Ariev, who was one of my, again, actually professors at the University of Arizona, and also Erçetin. And here are their assumptions in their study. So they also differentiated annotations. So they are talking about contextual annotations and textual annotations, and we can read what they are. Will facilitate reading comprehension for intermediate level learners. So they also considered the proficiency level of the students. And they hypothesized that annotation use will not be a predictor of reading comprehension for advanced level learners. So for the advanced level learners, they thought that this wouldn't make a difference. And finally, prior knowledge about the topic is an important predictor of reading comprehension, both for intermediate and advanced level of learners. And they thought that prior knowledge would make a difference. Okay, so let's see the results very quickly. Results indicate that annotation use didn't facilitate reading comprehension for either group, neither intermediate group nor advanced group, while a negative relationship was found between the time spent on video and graphics annotations and reading comprehension for the intermediate group. So can you imagine? This is even harmful. This was even harmful for the intermediate group. So this made them show or have a lower performance actually compared to the advanced group when they are given annotations. Prior knowledge was found to be an important variable. And finally, there was also qualitative data in the study. The qualitative data, as we expect, of course, collected through a questionnaire and interviews revealed that hypermedia reading had a positive impact on participants' attitude. So in terms of attitude, it's quite helpful because they like it, they want it. However, when it comes to their performance, as you can see, it's not the case. And I think this is also an interesting study. And there are like several other studies actually with, similar findings. In order just for you to have an idea about the use of annotations, I am just going to share a meta-analysis in which 22 different like similar studies were examined. And again, we can just focus on the last statement. Adding an additional mode. If you remember, we talked about like one type of a gloss, and we talked about like two types of glosses. So adding one additional mode to single textual gloss enhances vocabulary learning, whereas adding a mode to dual glossing does not result in significantly better vocabulary learning. So it's not, or it's never the more, the better when it comes to the multimedia. So that's why actually I just wanted to share these studies actually with you so that you can have an idea about how assumptions can differ from facts actually indeed. Okay, I think we are clear on what we mean by multimedia, focusing on especially two aspects, one being video and the other one being annotations. Now, I would like to share some applications actually with you, with which you can also present multimedia in a very principled way, I can say. And to this end, since there's a great, audience here, first of all, I would like to ask for your opinion about your favorite apps. And for this, I'm just going to, you know about it, right? I mean, you heard this saying, there's an app for that. There's an app for everything. There are lots of apps actually, but if the app is experience-based, I think it's quite helpful. So that's why I believe this activity would be really helpful, because in this activity, I'll be asking your favorite interactive multimedia apps or apps that you like. It can also be a game app, by the way. You don't have to write them in the chat box. I'm going to, list them. I'm going to collect them in a list actually through Mentimeter. And in order to join it, it's very easy actually. You just need to, let me share my screen again so that you can see my browser. Just a minute. So, okay, here are the instructions. So please, like very quickly, using your mobile devices, visit menti.com and then enter the given code. Or I'm also going to copy and paste the link in the chat box. So if you would like, you can directly click on it. You can start sharing your favorite apps. We just need 3 of them actually. So, okay. And by the way, I'm also going to share the whole list with you as part of my presentation when we upload it onto the website. Okay, so we have 1 participant so far. Please visit the link that I shared with you, or just follow the instructions given on the top so that you can share your favorite apps or games with us. Not in the chat box again, so please share it through Mentimeter, and it's going to create a wonderful, I think you can see my screen, right? No problem with that. Okay, there are 22 people so far who have shared their responses. By the way, if you would like to share more than 1 or 3 apps, you can just, send or submit your responses again and again. Oh, you can see my screen, so let me share my screen again then. Okay, let me share whole screen. Right now, you should be seeing it, I think. Okay, great. There are 55 answers so far. Yeah, you're sharing wonderful apps actually in the chat box, but that would be even greater if you share them in the Menti, because they are going to turn into a wonderful word cloud. Let's see the most popular app actually shared by you. Are you ready to see the results? Okay, let's see the results. So we got 90 actually responses so far. Thank you. And yes, of course, as expected, Kahoot is the most popular one, as you can see. And then we have all the other apps. As I said, I'm going to share this word cloud with you as part of my presentation. And I'll also check the whole list, so I can also share the whole list with you. Okay, thank you. They all, yeah, there are wonderful apps there actually. And the ones I'm going to mention, I think that also seems familiar with you based on your responses. Okay, let me be quick and let me share the apps I would certainly recommend so that you can have your time actually to explore them. Let me go back to my presentation. Again, thank you for your answers. Okay, the first app that I would like to share actually, I mean, I would do this presentation with this app indeed. However, with the silver, membership, it only allows 40 participants. So the app I'm talking about is Nearpod. So if you haven't heard of that before, certainly Nearpod is a wonderful app. And with Nearpod, by following, multimedia principles, you can really create nice interactive presentations. I just would like you to have a very quick idea actually of it, if possible. So here, for example, I have the Nearpod, screen, and there, as you can see, I have my presentation. I have my presentations actually, and as you can see here, I can just start a quick preview. If you go with live participation, just like Mentimeter, it gives a code and everyone can join the lesson as you share the code with them. I'm just going to provide a quick preview. So as you can see here, if you are sharing your slides, you can actually control your students' devices. As you turn the slides, the same slide also is turned on your student's screen. And if you are sharing, for example, it's possible also to take your students to virtual trips like this. I'm going to show it. So yeah, there is also drawing, virtual field trip. I think this is the kind of amazing part. And if your students are joining the lesson through their mobile phones, as they are moving it, they can just see, all around in 360. And when there's a video, that's also in line with the segmenting principle. When there's a video, I'm just going to show a video. If you want, you can play the video on your device so that everyone can watch it from you, or you can make the, controls available for your students so that they can, join your lesson that way as well. So that's why Nearpod is certainly great. And if this is something you just hear for the first time, you should certainly explore it. And again, instructions are that easy. You just, share the code with your students and they just join the, lesson. And finally, there's one more application that I would like to share. And this is something related to, annotations or glosses. Nearpod was mostly related to interactive videos and very rich visuals and multimedia. While this app, if I don't remember actually this one among the responses in the word cloud, but does anyone know the name of this one based on the logo? IL. That is, maybe you can write it in the chat box. This is actually another amazing, app. I can say this is Insert Learning. What happens with Insert Learning actually? It's a Chrome extension. It works on Chrome, and you can insert questions, discussions, insight, annotations, and everything into literally any website. So that's really great. And when you insert, when you are using this add-on, as you can see, you can assign this activity to your students by sharing it to Google Classroom or by sharing a link so that they can join the activity. Or you can highlight text on the page. You can add sticky notes. You can add questions. You can add discussion, etc. Let me show you a very quick example. So here, for example, I have my browser. And from my browser, for example, I can visit just, scholar.google.com. Okay. And I'm offering an MA class, let's say, and I like my students actually to do something on Google Scholar, and I'm just creating an activity there. So there, for example, I can look for, studies about annotations, okay, and language learning, let's say, or glosses. There are many studies actually. And as you can see here, here are the results. Okay, this is this is a real Google Scholar page. And based on this page, when I have this add-on on my, as you can see, among my extensions, when I click on it, a toolbar shows up, as you can see here. And by using this toolbar, I can, for example, highlight any part I like. For example, here, I can highlight it. Okay. And whenever I share this link with you, you will be also able to see it. And I can add some discussion questions like anywhere I want. So for example, I can add a quick discussion question here, asking about, what do you think about this study? So does it have positive results or negative results, let's say? So whenever I click on create, okay, it's going to be there. Or if I want, I can also insert a question at the very end, for example, to check my students, comprehension anywhere again. And the question types, as you can see, are very varied. There are like many different question types, and you can just use any of them, like list at least 2 supporting details of the paragraph. Once you're done, you're done. And then you can, whenever you want, you can share this with teachers so that they can also see it. In order to see it, I think it's going to ask you, let me share it, and let's try it actually with you right now. So, okay, I'm just creating this activity right now actually with you, just to show you how easy actually it is. And I think it's done. So now I have the link, as you can see. Whenever I share the link, and I think you will be also able to, you need to open it in Chrome, as far as I know. Let me copy the link again. Yes. Okay, let's click on it and let's see whether it's working or not. I mean, you can also try it some other time as well, but it certainly works actually. I mean, if you are also using Google Classroom, you can always assign this actually to your students. You can create a quick, you know, for example, I can go to the homepage of Insert Learning. You see, I have this class, for example, created, and if I want, I can assign this to my class so that I can also monitor their progress. Okay, are you able to weave the questions, the highlights, and the things I have created? Could be. I mean, if you should be on Chrome. You should be on Chrome actually to do this activity. Yeah, but that's really amazing actually. I mean, that's really great because you can literally turn any page into an activity. Okay, so for the interest of time, I think I need to just finish and finalize my presentation. So yeah, these are the apps actually. I can just recommend. There are even more actually, and for more, I'm just going to share them with you based on your responses. And I shared some studies with you, and if you would like to read them more and further, these are their citations. You'll find them and you can read them in the presentation. And I also would like to thank to these links, because I have taken all those visuals actually from them. So again, if you're interested in, you can certainly visit those links and see them actually for yourself, because there's more actually there. And yeah, that's all about my presentation. Thank you for participation and attention. And in addition to kind introduction made, if you would like to connect through different channels, on the right, you can find my contact info as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the interactive presentation. Yeah, the tools were amazing. Actually, Insert Learning was new also for me. And like you can see the comments in the chat box as well. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
So now I think we have like a little time for question and answer session, right? And I would like to just like wrap up the questions. There is one question, maybe for both of you, Dr. Polat and Dr. Reinhardt. Yeah, and like somebody asked about the collaborative games, like rather than the compete and win format. So like, can you suggest like, or like any game to promote communication between the students?
There are games that are not necessarily digital. So the one that I'm thinking about, and I'm going to write it in the chat here, it might disappear pretty quickly. It's called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. Let me see if I can find the a link to it. This is a kind of a cooperative game that I think has a lot of potential for language use. Here we go. Here's a link to the this kind of game. So what you do is you do use a computer, but you have your friends, and you can actually be in person looking at the screen together, or people can be on online working together and looking at it. And what you have to do is you have to tell the other people how to defuse a bomb by clicking on the right things, doing things in the right order. And this kind of game, I think, is really exciting and fun, because what you do is you have the time pressure. So you have the time pressure, you're like, oh no, I have to quickly communicate to my classmates or else we're all, or the people I'm playing with, or else we will all perish. So that's one example, but the genre is called multiplayer cooperative games. And there are also games like murder mystery games. And these are similar to Among Us, and some of them actually aren't digital at all. And what this is it sort of sets up a story, and then everybody who's playing the game has to play a role, and they have to take on a certain perspective, and they have to give clues and give hints. And so murder mystery games are, I think, another example of those multiplayer cooperative games that aren't necessarily even digital, but they force communication in order to solve so that a group of people can solve something together.
Okay, so I would like to move on to the second one quickly. Yes, there is one question. How do you deal with the technical problems that occur in the classrooms, like especially when trying to have digitally engaging lessons? So, yeah, Mustafa Hocam.
Yeah, actually, that's a very good question indeed, and that's part of our life, I think. Yeah, I mean, technical problems, we can't do without them. That doesn't mean that we want them, but they happen actually as we are using them. So what I do actually, I test them a lot before my lessons, before my seminars. I test them with my, I experiment them actually, literally, with my little daughter, with my wife, with myself, sitting on different devices, checking whether it works or not. So yeah, I get prepared actually a lot before the lesson, and I test them a lot. And another thing actually I do, rather than using a great variety of apps, I usually prefer the ones actually that can hold many features at the same time. So usually those apps being the ones I quite often use if they have those kind of features. So that's why, since I'm quite familiar actually with those apps because I use them quite often, that also minimizes the possibility of technical difficulties. So I test them and I use apps quite often, especially when they have a bundle of different features.
Okay, so I would like to move on with the third one quickly. There's one question related to the students with special needs. So are we going to exclude them, or what can we do to include them, kind of differentiation question here for the students with special needs? What should we do with the games part?
I think it's about the redundancy principle, right? And the redundancy principle actually tells us that when there's an audio narration, we should prefer graphics and visuals actually, and we shouldn't provide another channel actually for our students. So if, for example, we are talking about when we mean students with special needs, if we are talking about students who can't see or who can't hear, so that wouldn't be a channel for them. So in that case, we can, arrange our multimedia content accordingly. And by the way, as I also mentioned as part of my presentation, when it comes to these principles, actually they are hypotheses and they are theories. So there is some research which may not be conclusive about all these principles, but what is really conclusive here, it's never the more the better. So even if we have students with special needs, we shouldn't be providing actually them with more than 2 channels or 2 modes of delivery. If we do so, that's going to create a kind of cognitive overload. I mean, that was also the thing mentioned by Dr. Reinhardt. So if we want to, for example, if we want our students actually to play games, we need to make sure that they can really handle all of those different modes at the same time. And we need to identify our learners' maybe preferences, their working memory capacity, their individual differences, And accordingly, we can decide how we can arrange our multimedia content and how we can create this multimedia learning opportunities for our learners.
Okay, well, moving on to the next one, which apps are better for writing essays or those kind of activities in class? So, well, maybe that's more specific.
Actually, I mean, I can't name a specific app right now for, writing essays, but there are different apps actually for different purposes. For example, if we would like our students to create a nice outline before they start writing, there are really nice outline apps which are really helpful for our students to create an outline. If you want them to brainstorm, for example, there are mind maps apps like, even Canva or Padlet. And if we want them to collaborate with each other so that they produce ideas, there are, again, those kind of collaboration tools. So I don't know a specific app which works like better or the best for writing essays, but there are different apps for different purposes. I mean, for outlining, for producing ideas, organizing ideas, or, correcting, revising what they have written. So there are different apps for different purposes indeed.
Okay. So yeah, I can see one comment in the chat box and also in the Q&A part. So just like combining the two, I want to ask like Dr. Reinhardt to can it be dangerous for the students for the future in case they become addicted to the games? So what is the rate of being addicted to games?
Yes, well, people can become addicted to anything that is engaging and interesting, which is kind of a double-edged sword, because it would be great if people could be addicted to learning, right, as much as they would be addicted to playing games. So my advice is to, by getting your learners or anybody in touch with how they use games in a productive manner for something like learning, how they actually have control over their use of playing games, when they play, how long they play, with whom they play. That's an important part of teaching anybody how to do anything. So you can just forbid it and say, no, you can't do it. Or you can actually give them the power and teach them that they need to learn to control themselves. And so perhaps this is like an approach to even something like parenting or teaching, is it authoritarian, or are you going to say, well, this is something that's useful, it has some power to it, but it also has the power to, corrupt you or to do bad things. It's the same thing that my parents, in my culture, told me when I was old enough to drink alcohol. And they said, well, alcohol is dangerous if you use it too often. So you have to learn how to moderate, how to take control of your, and so, if you have a student who seems to be addicted to games, who doesn't pay attention, all you can do is decide, well, okay, now they're so addicted that they're going to have to go through some sort of therapy, or we're going to have to say, no, we can't play games because they're too addicted to it and it seems to have a negative effect. But again, I think playing games, games and gaming is one of those things that there are many things in modern life that we have to learn how to moderate, how to control. And if we have an addictive personality, then that's another sort of issue. And that maybe is a question for a medical practitioner. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, it helps. Thank you very much. And do you want to add anything, Dr. Polat, as a final comment? Then, yeah, before we finish, yeah.
For the specific question or in general? Let's go, John.
Just like becoming addicted about the games, yeah. What do you think? Yeah,
I mean,
learners.
Yeah, that's not something related to games. I think that's something, as also Dr. Reinhardt mentioned, that's also something related to, watching videos, browsing the internet, or like some other things not related to technology at all. So rather than, preventing our students actually or stopping them, from doing such things, we need to teach them some universal skills like, how they moderate, how they control, how they can really use them, effectively for their own good. So this is how or what we should them, rather than saying that, okay, only 1 hour of YouTube videos or half an hour of games, etc. Because once like there is no teacher like around them, or no parents around them, then they would just keep doing the same thing actually. So that's why we should be focusing on universal skills, life skills, which will be even more helpful, I think.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, if I can add one more thing, when
Yeah,
I think
sure.
about my own game playing, I allow myself to play games as much as I want to for 1 month in the summer. Otherwise, I only allow myself to play games on the weekend for maybe 2 hours at the most, because I know that if I don't regulate myself, if I don't discipline myself in playing games, that I'll just become so addicted. I will, and this is how you have to live your life, with many, many kinds of activities and temptations, and you have to know yourself. And part of what we do as teachers is we teach children and young people how to be responsible, healthy adults, and that might be part of it.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Well, thank you very much to both of you, yes, and for your great presentation. On behalf of the team, yeah, it's really nice to meet you too, yeah, I would say. And there are a lot of nice comments in the chat box. And thank you to our listeners, participants, for being with us tonight. And before we finish, I would like to remind you the survey. You can find the link in the chat box. So we are really looking forward to your feedback for the further events, for the future events, to make them better. So thank you very much to everyone. Have a great evening and hope to see you all in the third webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It has
Thank
been
you.
a pleasure for sure.